Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the April 5th meeting of the Milton Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commissioners are appointed by the Select Board to implement the rules and regulations of the State Wetlands Protection Act and its regulations and the Town of Milton bylaw that governs the wetlands. As a matter of formality, we introduce ourselves. My name is John Kiernan. If I can see you, I will see Steve if you go next.
Yep, I'm Steve Ivas, Conservation Agent.
Todd?
Arthur Doyle, member.
Oh, no, Arthur, you're next. I'm sorry.
Arthur Doyle, member.
Thank you. Todd?
Todd Hamilton, member.
Ingrid?
Ingrid Beatty, member.
And I cannot see Tom Palmer, but I think you're there somewhere.
Yes.
I am, and I can see you.
Ah, perfect. All right. There you are. Thank you. And I think that's it for tonight, because I know Hans Van Lingen is not able to attend, and Wendy Garpo is also in transit at an airport somewhere. She was going to try to check in, but we do have our quorum. So just to lay out the agenda for this evening, I think we're in a data collecting mode at this point. The item on the agenda for discussion is the proposed land swap for a potential school building at the Guile Road site. We have a number of people that would like to speak this evening, and I would actually ask, because I can't see Kevin Freitag. Is he on?
Yes.
He is. Perfect. Kevin, I had asked in anticipation of the discussion tonight, and as a result of the questions raised by members of the public and perhaps some of the commission members, I had asked two questions, and it would be, I think, very helpful for the public discussion to get a response from Kevin. And the two issues that were posed was, one, what is the significance of the Executive Office of Environmental and Energy Affairs? I know I said that backwards. It's Energy and Environmental Affairs. Because we did receive notification that they have a policy that suggested that the Conservation Commission vote for a land swap needed to be unanimous. And then there was a second issue that was raised by Miss Ann Sheffield very recently, and that is whether or not Chapter 184, Section 32, would essentially trump the previous legal opinion that the conservation restriction on the land deed would expire in 30 years. So I had asked Kevin to weigh in and give us his guidance on both of those issues. So Kevin, I can't see you, but are you in a position to respond to those questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I am. I can see myself on the video. Is that not coming up for any of the other members?
No, it's just that the way I've got it set up. I didn't see you, but I see you front and center now. Thank you, Kevin.
Got it. Well, yes, I can respond to both of those questions. First, in response to the question about the policy, as you stated, it is a policy of what is now the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. That, simply put, is the agency's recommendations to the municipality as to steps the municipality should take when requesting that our land protected by Article 97 be removed. But there is nowhere in state law or regulations that I'm aware of where there is a requirement that a conservation vote unanimously to transfer property outside of its control. So although the policy says that, I think that that's something that the agency at the time that policy was drafted back in, I believe, in 1998, was suggesting should be followed. There is no rigid requirement for that unanimous vote in state law. Regarding the second question, which is whether or not any of the restrictions in the deed would continue, notwithstanding Mass General Laws Chapter 184, Section 32, is a slightly more nuanced question. So if I could take it in a couple parts, I think it might be best in terms of just its understandability. That section of the general laws states that certain restrictions on deeds will lapse within 30 years unless other action is taken. It does not apply to conservation restrictions. So to be clear, I think the question was, does Chapter 184, Section 32 apply to conservation restrictions? The answer unequivocally is no, it does not. What we're left with is a situation where the commitment of that property to the care of the Conservation Commission and other language in that deed to the town suggests that the property is to be maintained in a certain way, and both the deed's commitment of the property to the control of the Conservation Commission and the other instructions in the deed, in my opinion, firmly place the property within the protections of Article 97. And that is the effect of that language, and that that protection does not on its own ever end. That protection, that the property be subject to the protections of Article 97, persists. However, there is a way by which municipalities can ask for relief from the protections afforded to that land by Article 97. And that is the process that the town is considering, whereby there would need to be a vote of town meeting to use that property for something other than its current purpose of, which is consistent with conservation and the protection of conservation land. And to use it for something other than that, there needs to be a vote by town meeting to do that. And then there needs to be a second vote by the state legislature by a 2/3 majority to affirm essentially the town's first vote. So the question about what is the effect of the restrictions in the deed is that it clearly subjects that land or portions of that land to the protections of Article 97, and it shall remain protected by Article 97 unless and until the municipality proceeds under the provisions of Article 97 to allow for that land to be used for something else. So I hope that clarifies the issue somewhat. That is separate and distinct from, for instance, language in the deed that talks about it not being permissible to construct buildings on that property in certain sections. Those restrictions have lapsed as a result of Chapter 184, Section 32. They were in existence for 30 years. There was no further action taken by the parties, and they have lapsed as a matter of law. The restrictions regarding the protection of the land for conservation purposes are perpetual in nature. They will continue to exist unless and until the town follows the procedures provided by Article 97 to remove that property from the protections of Article 97. And then the state legislature votes by 2/3 to approve the same transfer. So I hope that's answered your question.
It does. I think it was clear and succinct. And I wonder if any of the commissioners have a question as a follow-up to our town council's guidance.
2 hours or an hour.
Todd, do you have a question? Todd, I thought I heard you speaking. Do you have a question?
All right,
I don't think so.
thank you.
Are you there, Todd, or are you on mute? Todd, can you hear us? I don't see Todd responding, so I'm uncertain. Are there any other?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, it cut out for me for a minute.
All right. Did you have a question of Kevin Freitag?
No.
All right, thank you. Do any other commission members have a question of town council?
I do.
Go ahead, Tom.
Referring to that policy we discussed, we got a letter from Pete Jackson who said one feature of the Article 97 policy was, as it stated in the policy, if the policy was not followed by a municipality, that municipality would no longer be eligible for environmental grants. Do we know if that will happen? Do we know if we do not follow the policy, we will not be told that the grants will be frozen?
There may be two parts to that question. It may be first, is that accurate? That we would not be eligible? And secondly, whether or not that will apply under these circumstances.
Yeah, and we could put up the policy maybe on the screen so we could see the exact language. I could do it myself, or maybe somebody else could do it.
Steve, can you screen share that? And if not, Tom, do you have access to screen sharing?
I don't know. I can, bring it up on my screen. I don't know if you'll be able to see it.
John, I think I can get to it.
Okay, thanks.
One moment, okay?
Yes.
All I'm going to do is figure out how to get to a file here. Okay. Oh. Okay.
I happen to be looking at it myself right now.
Here we go. Hang on. Can you see that?
Not yet, Steve.
All right. I've lost the share screen. Are you still there?
Oh, we're all still here, yes,
Okay.
but we don't see anything on the screen, or at least I do not.
I could read the parts I'm thinking about if you like.
Sure, why don't you, well, that'll
That
speed
might
up
be
the
useful.
process.
Yes.
Go ahead.
All right, I'm looking at it. It says EOEA Article 97 Land Disposition Policy, February 19th, 1998. I'm looking past number 1, Statement of Policy. Number 2, Conditions for Disposition Exceptions. As part of the disposition, real estate of equal or greater fair market value or value and use of proposed use, whichever is greater, and significantly greater resource value as determined by EOEA and its agencies, are granted to the disposing agency. So here we see a standard for a swap where the land that is returned to Article 97 has equal or greater fair market value or value and use of proposed use. That's a standard in the policy. And I would say it's hard for us to apply that standard because we don't have any appraisals or valuations of these parcels. So it's hard to understand whether this swap would meet that standard. At any rate, as you said, it's 2 questions. If it didn't meet that standard, do we know that EOA would not pull back on grants? And I say that because if you go to number 4,
It's on the screen. It's on the screen. Tom, can you see it?
Yeah, and I'm going to have to, I can't make it go back and forth. I can't scroll it. So I can't
No, but
go
Steve,
to.
no, Steve put it up there. Steve is screen sharing it, not you.
So Steve, do you see, let's look at the last paragraph.
He's on 4.1. That's what you want, I believe, Tom.
Yeah, it says, we're looking at it right now.
Yes.
Way down at the bottom. After the effective date of this policy,
Oh, yes.
that's sort of the kicker about the grants not being available. Any municipality, yeah, write that last paragraph just before the name of Trudy Cox. This is where it says, we may not be eligible for grants because we haven't complied with a policy. So that's kind of an EOEA decision, I would guess. And I feel like I don't know myself what where that decision would go. If I were to vote to relinquish this land, would I be endangering grants? That's my question.
Kevin, are you in a position to respond to that?
I am. I think it's an excellent question. I just would like your commission to know that my office has been working with one of the members of what is now the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Mr. Rob O'Connor, for quite some time on this entire concept of moving some of this land around. And that issue has frankly not come up. I would say that in speaking with him, there appear to be things that the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs now considers that aren't in this policy. So I'm not exactly sure that I can tell you definitively whether or not this particular requirement that we're talking about here is something that the agency requires or would, and if the municipality didn't have a unanimous vote of the Conservation Commission, it might then subject the municipality to not receiving eligible grants. I don't have the answer to that, but as the question is being asked, I've just emailed Mr. O'Connor at the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and I'll let you know when I get a response. I don't expect that will be in the next couple of minutes, but I certainly will relay that information to the commission once I have it.
All right, and for members of the public and those commission members, I said at the very beginning that we're in a data collecting mode, and my conclusion is that tonight will be data collection only, and that it would be unlikely that we would take a vote on this issue. We do have a regularly scheduled meeting next Tuesday, so I'm sure there are going to be other questions that remain unanswered tonight. And Tom, you raised another one earlier in your presentation, suggesting you don't know the value of this because we need to make sure that there's a net benefit to the Conservation Commission. And that would be another question that we might be able to resolve, but certainly not tonight. My strong suspicion is that there will be no vote tonight on this proposal, but I think we need to identify the questions that need to be answered, and then we can continue it for further consideration next Tuesday. And if that's something that you could drive for us, Kevin, and see if you can get a response from EOEEA, that would be very helpful to us. All right, Tom, is that a fair response and approach? Obviously, we need additional information.
Yes, and I would just add that as far as information, what do we know about the proposal? There's an article, correct? But we haven't gotten the text of the article, I don't think. And I don't believe we gotten anything in writing at all. So it just seems that we think we know what this is about, but to not have it in writing makes it really informal from my point of view.
Right, and if it can be done with the appropriate formality for this town meeting, then it makes sense to proceed on that basis. If we don't have sufficient information, then it may be that it would be for a future town meeting's consideration. Because I know the warrant committee is yet to weigh in, and I believe the select board has not finalized its position. So it may be that we have to continue it beyond next Tuesday as well. But it really depends upon how much information we can get between, well, including tonight, and between now and next Tuesday.
Yeah.
So again, data collecting at this juncture, and I think these have been good questions, and I appreciate Kevin's response. Are there any other questions of Kevin? Because we're stealing his time, so to speak. Any other commissioners? Are there members of the public that would like to ask a question of town
Yes.
council?
May I ask a question? This may, thank you. This may not be just for Kevin, I don't know, but when you're talking about value, you're not talking just about monetary value, right? On the value of this land or trade, I'm kind of asking this as a two-part question maybe, because I think it's not just about acreage either, right? A piece of land has environmental value, resource value, monetary value, all related to Article 97, I'm saying. I think it's a little more complicated. I do think it's wise to slow this down a little bit. And I know that's not what the building committee really wants to hear. They've worked hard and put a lot of time into this, but we're just beginning to really put time into this to try to understand the ramifications and the different impacts and consequences that this may have. And also the special qualities of these pieces of land and their connections to the community, environmentally, socially, geographically, all of that. So I think it's wise. That was one of the first things I wanted to say as a citizen and a concerned Parkway resident and a member of a group who's trying to preserve the Parkway. Let's slow it down a little bit. So that's good. But on the value question, can you say more? Because I wanted to be clear on that. Article 97's concept of value.
Kevin, are you able to respond to that?
I think in part, I can let you know that I have shared with Rob O'Connor at the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs everything about the pieces of property that we're dealing with here that I have, including deeds and the assessor's maps. And he and I have spoken about the property and the quality of the land. And he knows everything that I know about the property of this land at this point. So although we haven't gotten, sort of the final thumbs up on it, every interaction that I've had with that office has been positive so far, and they've driven the town to look for more property and to sort of make this a deal that they thought would be appropriate from their perspective. And from my perspective, the town has done that. I can't comment on whether or not they've made a final determination about value, but they certainly have driven the town to offer more, and the town has offered more, and they seem to, the conversation seemed to be, going in a positive direction.
All right, thank you.
John, this
Go ahead,
is Ingrid. I may have misunderstood here, but I believe Mr. Meduna's question was slightly different, and correct me if I'm wrong. What I understood was the term value in the article. What is the definition? Is it limited to a monetary value, or is there also does that word also encompass other things like value of habitat or rare species? Is that what you were getting at? I'm not really quite sure what the nature of your question was, but
right. I mean, value is a little vague, right? I mean, monetarily, that land probably has a lot of value if you kind of compare it to the recent ice house.
But there are other measures, of course.
Yeah, there's other measures. I think, conservation, resource, environmental, that kind of stuff, right. I do think we need to look at the particulars. It's not just, it's not acreage alone, because you can talk about a gain in acreage, but a huge loss in other environmental and geographical values that a piece of land has serving as conservation land, so. That's
what I understood. So I think, does this require looking into the legislative history, or, I think the question is, what's the definition of the word value in this context of the article encompass?
Right. And
fair observation and analysis, Ingrid. And while we're actually looking at that, there may be alternatives to increase the swamp. I mean, there may be other land that if the value was not appropriately a net gain to the Conservation Commission, then there may be other land. Again, measuring the intangibles. I think that's an important point, Joe, that there are all of the intangibles, but they're real resource values that we have. So there may be opportunities to sort of increase the value of that which would be exchanged. So there are all kinds of approach. And Tom, I salute you for, identifying this as an issue. Is it truly a net gain for the Conservation Commission? So again, we're in the data collecting stage, so we've got some work cut out for us.
Could I just mention there was one other question hasn't been answered that we did ask, namely, was there a state contribution when the town paid $170,000 for this parcel in 1978?
I do not have an answer for that, Tom, and I know you asked that before. I was interested and I was going to identify those that have written in that are not present here tonight, but I note that, one of the letters that the Conservation Commission received and as part of the public record was from the grand nieces of Amy Lamb it was actually from Amy Lamb Southworth and Tom and Larry Lamb. And those are I think they're the grand nephews and grandniece of the Lamb sisters. And it sounded like from their letter, which was very articulate and quite eloquent, that the money they received was significantly undervalued when they sold it to the town of Milton. There's no reference to the comment, and I'm not suggesting this is a legal document, Tom, because the real answer is I don't know. I know you raised the question as to whether or not there was any Commonwealth participation. I am not aware of any, and I don't know if Kevin is or anybody else is. My understanding was the money was approved by town meeting back in 1978, and that amount was solely from the town of Milton. But I gladly stand corrected if somebody has better information.
I just would add that that's another trigger in the Article 97 policy. You aren't complying with the policy if you take land out of conservation, if you're a municipality and the state contributed to your ability to buy it.
Kevin, do you have any additional information on the payment? I do not.
Do not.
Okay.
All right.
I mean, can I ask one question too? I just wanted to say, I read that letter from the Lamb family this morning, and I was deeply moved by that letter. And it'd be great if people could read that somehow. I thought it was just like a voice. I was like the ghost of Amy Lamb rising here. It was just a very powerful thing to know these folks are still out there and they care about this, it's just amazing, actually. So,
Joe, for your knowledge and for the benefit of the public, it is part of the public record. It is available to see. We are probably a couple of decades behind in terms of getting our files up into electronic data status. We're working on it. Arthur Doyle is doing yeoman service with the select board, exploring grants to see if we can get some money to transfer our files into electronic data files that would be accessible on the internet. Right now, I think you actually have to go to the DPW to see the file.
oh geez, wow.
But we are working on that, and I agree. I think it was quite eloquently written.
I mean, maybe it could just be emailed to anyone who's interested. I don't know, from your office there, I don't know, but I just think it's worth hearing these folks. I mean, they've got roots deep in the community, so.
Right, and I was going to list this for the public's benefit that we did receive from Peter Jackson, a renowned landscape architect. He wrote a letter to the Conservation Commission opposing the move, as did Alex Whiteside. So those are all part of the public record. And certainly they've all been distributed to the commission members and they're accessible to the public for their examination and consideration.
I'd like to see the Peter Jackson. I haven't seen that letter.
Joe, I will send it to you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. This has been an incredible learning experience these past few weeks, just learning about the history of this landscape and its place in the community and that family, and also just kind of getting to know that land and the trees, the quality, the largeness. It's been a very, like you say, data collecting, but it's kind of powerful stuff too, so I'm glad we're open to that.
There may be a way to piece this together, in Tom, in response to your question, because I'm actually looking at the deed. I've got the deed in my hand. I can't screen share, but I can wave it around. This is the deed.
Yeah, I've seen it too.
All right, so it says on the deed that Amy Lamb and Rosamond Lamb, both of Boston, Suffolk, for $170,000 consideration paid, grant to the town of Milton, a municipal corporation with quitclaim covenants. Then it goes on to describe the land. Now, in the other hand, I have the special town meeting from 1978. And it's talking about the conveyance or the purchase of the land in the amount of 22 acres. And I'm sorry, I'm just reading through it now to see if I can come up with a dollar amount. I see that it says here, which plan is on file in the office of the town engineer, be acquired for conservation purposes, that the sum of $170,000 be appropriated, therefore, that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $20,000 be applied from the purchase of land property account, the sum of $40,000 to be transferred from the conservation fund, and the town treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow up to the sum of $110,000. So it appears from the $170,000 appropriated by the town meeting in 1978, that amount matches the amount in the deed, which is $170,000. The implication of that from a mathematical point of view is that there was no contribution from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Could you just look at the last sentence though, in that Article 7 from 78 though? After the last part you read?
The last sentence says, it was reference to the $110,000 to be appropriated under the applicable provisions of law, and that town boards and a committee as appropriated be authorized to make application for state and federal funds to assist and or reimburse the town in connection with the acquisition of the land referred to in this article.
That was deliberately
What's that?
written in, as if in anticipation there would be a request. And many have seen that sign at the site, high in the tree.
Yes.
It's 44 years old, I think, where it's called a joint project of the Concom and the Commonwealth, as if they both contributed. So they're just little hints that some state money might have been used. I think a lot of people have heard of this self-help program where conservation land can be acquired by municipalities with grants from the state. That's the kind of thing I'm wondering about. And I really don't know how I would get the answer.
All right, well, let's ask Arthur Doyle. Do you know, Arthur, where that information would be? Would it be in the town treasurer's office if there was any kind of a state grant that reimbursed us?
I can't say that I know, John, but I'll be willing to make the inquiry tomorrow.
Perfect, all right. Right back to our data collection role. It's a legitimate question, and we will endeavor to find the answer.
Thank
All right,
you.
anything else of Kevin? All right, thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate very much your guidance and insight. And if we can move on, again, we're data collecting. So I think that Sean O'Rourke or Mike Zulis, I'm not exactly sure who wanted to make a presentation on behalf of the school building committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my name is Sean O'Rourke, Chair of the School Building Committee, also a town meeting member, Precinct 8. I I was going to have Mike Zulis just kind of give a quick opening remark, if that's okay. And I can jump into my presentation after that.
Sure, that's fine.
Thank you.
Mike, I don't see you. Are you there?
I am here, John.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you, members of the commission. Thank you, Mr. Ivas. Just as an overview, to try to provide some insight as to how the school building committee came to this point and how we view this. First off, many times in town government, we make decisions and we take votes that aren't necessarily long-lasting. They don't necessarily affect a lot of people. There aren't always competing interests. We don't sometimes have a lot of people paying attention to us when we make those decisions. But every once in a while, we get a decision and a vote that is very consequential. It's a vote that has a long-lasting effect on a lot of people for a long time. And that is the decision that you have now. And that is the vote that you have now. Now, oftentimes, these consequential decisions, we're faced with differing interests and competing positive things, good things. And I think that's the case here. We have the conservation interest. And, I don't know anyone who disagrees with the desire to have more conservation land. We have the neighborhood interests, and I don't know anyone who disagrees that the interests of the neighborhood should be paramount. Certainly anyone who's running for office or any elected official wants to recognize the interests of the neighborhood. And then we have the interests of the schools and educating our children in buildings and in spaces that can provide them a proper education. And I don't know anyone that disagrees with that either. So we have some competing interests, it seems, here. And when we're trying to make these decisions, we have a lot of opinions, a lot of data, as you pointed out, John, and a lot of biases. And it's almost like it's a thicket. I think of these decisions, it's like a thicket. You have all of these competing interests and opinions and interests, and you have to find your way through the thicket. And when you find your way through the thicket, in my view, the goal is, what is the greater good? Try to find the greater good through all the thicket of the data and the opinions and the biases. Now, I'm going to talk very briefly about those three competing interests here and how the school building committee has dealt with them: the conservation interest, the neighborhood concerns, and the interests of the families of school Milton and school children in Milton for the next few decades. First, the conservation interest. I don't need to tell this group how important that is. It's a critical consideration. I do need to tell you that the school building committee has considered the conservation interest to be paramount. And in moving forward with this, the school building committee has wanted to make sure that the conservation interest is paid attention to and maintained. And that's why the school building committee has tried to come up with a plan that actually leads to more, as some have pointed out, more protected conservation land here in town. And we're hoping that we could get a win-win between the school needs on the one hand and the conservation concerns on the other hand. And while some may differ, as the discussion has highlighted here, while some may differ subjectively on which conservation land is better, I think there are three things that are undeniable about this proposal. One is, for what it's worth, the land that would become protected under this proposal, protected conservation land, is not currently protected. It is for general municipal purposes. Number two, I think it's undeniable that there would be more protected conservation land under this proposal. It'd be somewhere north of 2 acres more of protected conservation land. And number three, I think it's also undeniable that we have the two other parcels that we're talking about here in the swap, the parcels at Herrick Drive and Randolph Ave. Those are separated parcels currently. There are separated parcels, And the plan here would marry those parcels. It would marry the protected conservation parcel at Herrick Drive, and it would marry the protected conservation parcel at Randolph Ave, and it would indeed create a conservation parcel from a protected conservation parcel on Randolph Ave that would extend all the way up to the, I believe, to the Blue Hills, because then you run into the state protected conservation land. So the hope on the part of the school building committee, working with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, was that the conservation interest here would be addressed by uniting that conservation land at Herrick Drive and Randolph Ave that is currently separated, and by creating more protected conservation land. Now, let me just briefly go to the second interest here, and that's the neighborhood concerns. We are very fortunate that any change to any neighborhood in Milton is hard, because people generally like their neighborhoods and they don't want them to change. And we see this over and over again. We just saw it up in East Milton last fall, when the proposal to build a new fire station caused some great concern among some in the neighborhood. But in that case, I think we found, as a town, we found the greater good. And the Fire Building Committee is working with the neighborhood groups to try to address their concerns, to try to make it a win-win, a positive result for everyone. And that's the same goal here. The same goal here. The School Building Committee's goal is to continue to work with the neighborhood and to try to address any concerns that they have. So this is a positive result for everyone. But it is change, and any change is unknown and it's hard. But I think we can agree that if you don't acknowledge change and you don't manage it, then you'll get run over by it. And there's no clearer example of that than in affordable housing in this town. For 30 years, we did not acknowledge and we did not manage change in affordable housing in this town. And now we're being run over by the surfeit of 40B developments. So as we navigate the changing needs of our school children and our schools, the School Building Committee, just like the Fire Building Committee, is committed to making sure that the concerns of the neighborhood are addressed. So it would be a positive, not only for the families of the school children, but also for those in the direct neighborhood. Finally, and I'll move along here because I have to pick up, I have a child pickup in a little while. We have the interests of the families and the school children in Milton for the next several decades. I don't think there's any dispute at this point that in order to properly educate the children in Milton for the next few decades, we need another school building. Anyone who looks critically at the facts can see that. And after our School Building Committee confirmed the work that had been done by other committees, this School Building Committee has spent more than 2.5 years trying to find land on which to build a school building. It has not been easy. It has required efforts by members of this committee working with the planning directors in town, former town administrators, experts, state officials, lawyers, neighborhood groups. And we didn't just focus on town-owned land, although that would be the most cost efficient, because paying for land would be almost prohibitive. But we put out an RFP to see if there was any land that we could buy, and we received 0 responses. So for a long time, as we searched, this new school building was like a square peg, and Milton's available land was like a round hole. And we just couldn't find anything. But finally, we believe we found the square hole. We found the square hole for our square peg. And that's the plan before you. Now, there is no plan B. If the 2.5 years of work by the School Building Committee and the others who've worked so hard on this is tossed aside, the alternative will be to investigate trailers to house our elementary school students. And in addition to being a lousy educational environment, trailers are very expensive. And so that would be the next course, I believe, for the School Building Committee. if this proposal were tossed aside and we don't come up with anything else, and we certainly haven't in the last 2.5 years. So, I'll end with this, everyone. 20 years ago, the people of this town and the town as a whole faced another consequential decision, and that was whether to rebuild our 6 schools. It wasn't easy. It was change. It was hard. But the people who took those votes and who took those actions on the committees and the town as a whole, I feel that they found their way through the thicket. They found their way through the competing good alternatives, and they found the greater good. And since then, nearly 10,000 Milton school children have enjoyed incalculable benefit, as have we all. And that is their legacy. What will be our legacy? 20 years from now, what will they say of us? What will they say is our legacy? And so all I'll ask you, ladies and gentlemen, is to try to find your way through the thicket here. Try to find your way to the greater good so that you as individuals and as a committee and that we as a town have the opportunity to leave a positive legacy for the thousands of Milton's families and the tens of thousands of Milton school children in the decades to come. And so I think from John, you'll get a lot more data, but I just wanted to kind of set the idea, Mr. Chairman, of what we're looking at it, how we're looking at it as an overall view. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And your remarks are, I think, very significant because one of the questions that I have entertained over the last few weeks is whether or not the school building committee actually did an alternatives analysis and looked at other options. And I think Sean did a great job at our prior meeting in saying exactly what the school building committee did, but it bears some reiteration that this is not just a one-shot deal, that the great efforts were made to explore other options. So I appreciate the fact that there's no plan B, but you certainly looked at other potential plans, A, B, C, D, all the way through the alphabet, and wintered it down to the Guile Road. And I think that if I'm inaccurate, that I'm interpreting Sean O'Rourke's presentation, and so I'm sure you're correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, you're correct, Mr. Chair. So I've taken the presentation that I provided last time and essentially expanded on it and tried not to repeat information that was already there, essentially for the brevity of this meeting. First I want to thank you and the commission for this. Having a dedicated meeting tonight on an off cycle for you guys is truly appreciated, and it kind of warrants it, for this project. Throughout our entire endeavor, we've reached out and had direct contact with the neighbors. That was our first thing once we identified this site as engagement. Mr. Menduno will attest, we had coffee the other day to discuss this even a little bit more. I'm open to meeting people in person to, work with them. Pine Tree Brook, we've engaged with them multiple times. We've had a number of community forums that I'll talk about. And then finally, the very first people we reached out to was Home Inc., the direct abutters to this project. Here tonight, I see that he is in the audience, is Ned Corcoran. I was hoping if Ned could speak, if you'd allow him.
Oh, absolutely. That would be very helpful.
Excellent. Thank you.
Now?
Here you are. Okay. Welcome, Ned.
Thank you. I think most of you know that I am a developer lawyer. I mostly represent folks who are trying to bring change to Milton. It is unusual for me to represent abutting interests, but in this case, I've been hired by Home Inc., who was initially extremely concerned. They are the only direct abutter to this property. And some of their members, Home Inc. is 98 units spread over a fairly large tract of land that was formerly owned by the Lamb family. And there are several of the units that are very close to the edge of this property. and could have fairly significant direct impact from a development of a school, outdoor activities, etc. And so they were pretty concerned about it. But I think in the long run, their determination has come around to the fact that weighing all of the interests, the demands that are coming, that have been before the town, that are going to increase in the town to educate children, with more children coming, that it's very difficult to find other locations. They think it's in the best interest of the town that this land swap go forward. They've developed a set of significant conditions and concerns that they want to make sure are addressed. We've shared them with Sean and the committee. Sean has indicated that they would work with us. They want a seat at the table to have discussions about all of the specific potential impacts that could arise. But they are not, Home Inc. is voted not to oppose this land swap. I think that is significant. They think that weighing all of the interests, and I think Mike Zulis did a pretty good job of outlining all of them, but weighing all of the interests and understanding that this commission retains jurisdiction over the protection of wetland resources that exist on and proximate to this property, particularly the vernal pool, the potential vernal pool that I know that Steve Ivis flagged out on the property, and the isolated wetland that potential isolated wetland that he's flagged that's right along Guile Road. We think that it's possible that those interests can be protected. It may be possible that the isolated wetland could be replicated, and that replication could enhance the protections around the vernal pool. But we think that on balance, that the right thing to do is to support this land swap, and to continue to work closely with the building committee as it goes forward with respect to understanding the physical constraints of the property, wetland impacts, water, stormwater, drainage, noise, etc. All of the buffer issues that you need to be concerned about. I think that if they work closely with the committee, and the committee works closely with Home Inc. Home Inc. is satisfied that their concerns can be addressed, and that in the big picture, the needs of the town can be specifically managed and addressed. So that's what I've been authorized to say. I look forward to, in the future, to working with Sean and the committee if town meeting happens to approve it and this matter goes forward. But as I said, Home Inc. is supportive, and they think this is the right thing to do. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ned. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So, as I alluded to earlier, I didn't want to kind of repeat a lot of the information that was there before. The video that we played, that I'm assuming a lot of people have seen, and if not, we can email the link out later, that displays the overcrowding of the schools, specifically at the Cunningham Library. It's a second grade classroom that's kind of in the library, made out of essentially office petitions. So there's essentially no acoustical separation between the classroom and the library. So you can just imagine what type of environment that is for a child. We do have one of the parents of one of those students here tonight, Sean Burke, and I'd like to let him speak if you allow.
Oh, most certainly. Thank you. We'd be delighted to hear from him.
Thank you.
He may be on mute. I don't see him.
Yeah, he's there. He's muted right now. I see it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Hello. How's everybody doing? Thank you, Sean. I was just here listening in, and I'm going to, I'll be brief, but I do have two kids in Cunningham School. One's in first grade, one's in second grade, and my daughter is in the classroom in the library that's separated by an 8-foot temporary partition. Watching all the building committees and watching the meetings and watching the presentations, it seems pretty clear that a new school for the town is inevitable, and if not already overdue. So I just want to speak in support of this. And, it's a tough project to take on. It's a big expense for the town, but it's going to be needed. So I just wanted to ask just to show up here and give my support for the project. So note that COBCOM approves the Article 97 swap.
Well, Sean, we're very grateful for your patience and staying here with us to address the commission, the public, and make your views known. We're grateful.
Thank you very much. And thank you for opening up this public comment. I think it's very important that the public have a chance to weigh in this. So we appreciate you doing that.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, there is one person with their hand raised. So I figure I might call on them before we jump into my presentation. Lydia's iPhone, I think it says.
If I could figure out how to work the hand raise.
You just raised.
I know what you're talking about, but whoever raised their hand is invited to speak.
Lydia, you're muted still. He's still muted.
And Lydia, tell me who you are as well, please. Your last name.
There we go. Hi, Linda Watson, Precinct 1, Town Meeting Member, and Blue Hills Parkway resident. I have several questions, so I'll go through them really quickly. One is, and I'm sure this is somewhere, and first of all, I want to thank the school building committee. I know that they've been working very hard on this, and it's a difficult issue. And as Mr. Zula said, there are always competing interests, and we have to look at the larger issues and how those affect the town. And I agree with that. I agree that we need more housing. I think we've been, negligent in not providing more affordable housing for the town. So I'm not one against development, but how it's done is very important. I also don't disagree that we need to do something about the schools and the overcrowding. I don't think anyone would debate that. But I have several questions. One is for the building school committee is what are the projections for the number of kids in 20, 30 years? We're talking about building a building in perpetuity and losing a valuable piece of land. So I think it's really important to look at the long term. And I haven't heard anything about that. And, I haven't been on every meeting, so I may have missed that. But I wanted to know what the projections were in terms of the number of students. I know it's difficult now, but what will it be in 20 years, 30 years? Also, the properties that are being swapped out, I understand it's a greater acreage, but I also understand that a lot of that is not buildable anyway. So in terms of value, that it's not equal or greater than to what percentage is buildable and, would have not been built on anyway because it's not suitable for building. So that's another question. The other thing I just want to say is that as a resident of the Parkway for 30 years, I own my house, I raised my daughter there. I grew up in Milton, I went to Milton High School, I went through the schools. But as a resident, we're on a street that's on the historic register. And I don't think that should be taken lightly. It's a parkway. It's a gateway to the Blue Hills. And we're talking about if this school is built, we will be burdened by 3 out of the 7 townwide schools. 3, plus the preschool, which is in a couple doors down from my house, which is in the old library building. That is a huge percentage of burden for one street and for one neighborhood. And I think it's important to think about that. We have the Ice House directly across the street that we're going to be dealing with. and that's going to be disruptive. And as anyone who lives on the Parkway or travels on the Parkway knows, traffic is horrendous and it causes pollution, you know, in terms of the environment, pollution. I deal with trash in my yard. I'm the other end of the Parkway, and I have kids cutting through my yard to get to school and back. So that's going to be another issue. So those are things that are concerned to me. Again, I know this is a really difficult situation and you can't make everybody happy, but really think about, this is not just another street in town. This is a historic, really important piece of land that we are once again taking away part of that landscape. And I think that's very significant in addition to the parcel itself. But how does that sit on the property and what are the environmental impacts of that? Traffic, pollution, trash. So those are my questions. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good questions, good points. I should comment, though, to put it in sort of historical context, there were 2 schools there before, because I went there. There was Pierce Elementary, because we had 5 elementaries when I was there, and then they built Pierce Junior High School. So they had both an elementary school and a junior high school on Guile Road. I know that's back in the day. And your projection question is a great one.
That's where I went to school, sir. That's where I went to school. So I know.
And yeah,
but we didn't use that road. We used just Guile Road back then for the most part.
To Canton Avenue, correct?
Yeah.
And the projections is a fair statement because when I graduated, there were 343 graduating seniors. And I think that currently there are less than that. I don't know what the projections are, but I know that Sean does know.
Okay, good.
And I just
I do.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, sorry. First I want to apologize, Linda, mispronouncing your name. My eyes.
Oh, that's right. The Y throws everyone off.
Yeah, I apologize. So, you know, for me, once I get into my presentation, I've noted all your questions, and I'll address them as I go through my presentation. But just quickly, you know, projections and stuff like that. The town hires, or the district hires a company called NASDAQ that does projections out 20, 30 years. It is nobody could do that. I mean, in reality. So what happens is, you know,
well, you know what the birth rate is now, you know, and you know, I mean,
correct. 20 years, 30 years from now, they're not in school. So what happens is NASDAQ does utilize NASDAQ does utilize birth rates. The things that they don't account for and the numbers that I'll be showing are unpermitted construction projects. So I think as everyone's aware, the town's under a ton of change recently, and it's going to be going forward. So, you know, we have, for numbers, you know, roughly about 740 units on the books or being planned, half of which, 350, are going to be 2- and 3-bedroom units. So most likely you're going to have a number of children in there over that time span. Similarly, as everyone's starting to be aware now of the new state regulations along the MBTA for rapid transit, and the kind of densities that they're requiring on there that I know the planning board's starting to dive into now are going to further exacerbate, you know, the numbers that we're seeing. So that's the long-term end of it. The short-term end of it is we need a school. You know what I mean? And if this facility that we build, an educational facility, turns into something else, it gives flexibility in the school district, and I'll touch on that as I go through my presentation. And just so I note them to make sure I got them all, the proposed land swap lands, are they buildable? We'll address that in the presentation. The historic register, this is not the presentation, but just so you know, we have engaged VHB Engineering. A friend of mine is the head traffic person for them, and they have tons of experience working on historical parkways. We had a meeting with them at our last school building committee, and we're engaging them right now for some conceptual traffic studies. And then the last one regarding school density, we don't really touch on that one in the presentation. I'm happy to meet with you to talk about it further.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. So with that, Mr. Kiernan, would you want me to just kind of jump into my presentation?
Yes, sir, if you would.
Yes, sir. Back to the beginning, perfect. So, you know, as I do these presentations, I always kind of lead in with our committee so everybody kind of knows our names and faces. So, you know, our committee, for those who are not familiar with it, we're made up of 9 members. The 5 of us at the top are appointed members by the town moderator. We're a mix of design and construction professionals with years of experience. On the bottom left, the school committee appoints 2 people, Ada Roseburn and Betty White, that are also here with us tonight. And the select board has also appointed 2 members, Mike Zulis, who we heard from earlier, and also Glenn Hoffman, who's a local architect. He's not on the select board, but you know, he represents the architectural end of us, and he has a lot of school experience. The projections that Linda was just asking about, what we're displaying here is our enrollment data. So the numbers that you see to the left of that red line are actual enrollment, and you can see the rapid growth. And this is from pre-K to 12. So this is the entire district. The enrollments going forward, again, they don't account for any of those construction projects or anything there, but they're essentially flat, trail off a little bit as they get out later. We have done detailed analysis of a lot of these trends. We've taken the projections they did back in 2008, 2009, and looked at the trends that they did back in 2008 and compared them again. For example, in 2008, they made projections out to 2018, 2020. What we did is we took that actual data from 2018 and 2020 and looked at them, and they diverge. So the study that we've done on these projections show that they're conservative every time. They don't want to show that they wouldn't want to show this type of graph because it would cause people into a flurry. So, we've been working with them, and we kind of understand their logic for it now. And what they do is they take a birth rate in the town, and they say 5 years later, that child will enter kindergarten and progress through. As everyone knows in this town, the number of real estate transactions that occur with large families, 1 to 2, sometimes 3 children, move into town. The superintendent's here tonight, and we'll talk about, families that show up randomly throughout the year to enroll their students. And we're a public education system. We cannot turn kids away. We have to find room for them. So that's kind of the crunch that we're at. The one thing that came up the other day while I was having coffee with Joe Mondugno is, for me, I am in the weeds on this project. I know anything and everything back and forth. And we've been doing this for 2.5 years. The problem with some of these presentations is I have to squeeze it all down to a 10-minute presentation, especially for town meetings. So trying to squeeze 2.5 years of everything that we've looked at into these small presentations sometimes gets a bit tough. And then sometimes I take assumptions that I think everyone else knows what's going on in my head or what's there. So what I wanted to do is kind of lay out for us tonight, what this project timeline is going to look like. So what we're looking at here is a timeline of essentially what this project would be. So assuming that we would go to town meeting this May and get a positive town meeting vote, my projection is probably sometime next year we would have the passage of Article 97, and then an assumed selection for MSBA, which is the Mass School Building Authority. If we got selected by them next year, and that is not guaranteed, we would jump into essentially a design development stage where we work on the land, design it, build, get ready to issue what I call construction documents, blueprints. During that same time, through that, most likely there will be an override at some point. So, we haven't shied away. We're obvious saying that, and there's some, work to be done on there. And that's kind of what I want to focus on after we get this land identified and approved, that we can start working on the financial component of this. Then the other part that comes in is the construction timeline. And the longer we wait for this, the more expensive it's going to be. So Joe was asking me the other day, is your back up against the wall? Yes, it is. I mean, there's no space in the existing school system right now. Looking at this timeline, we're not going to have a school till 2030. So, these are the things that I know in my mind that I don't think have been clear enough with everybody in the town of why this is so critical. We need to get this, done quickly. So the other part that comes in that, again, is stuff that goes on in my mind. I'm an engineer, like I do a lot up here, and I try to get it on paper as best as I can. This whole project is an equation, and it's it's very complex. And the things that went into there, like my presentations, I've always said, the people ask, where is it going to go and how much is it going to cost? The one that we took on as a committee, we looked at it and said, what are we building? Us as a committee over the past 3 years have studied a number of different things. We looked at an elementary school. Before that elementary school, was the pre-K to fit? Or was it just kindergarten to fit? And were we going to build an early childhood education center? Were we going to do a middle school? Were we going to do a middle school pre-K? So there are a lot of options in there. And as everybody knows in equations, anything that's a variable throws everything off because every one of those things there have their own components to it. The other part that plays into how much it will cost is where is it going to go? So as Mike Zulus, alluded to earlier, we looked at purchasing private land from private entities through an RFP process, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We also looked at ground lease options from private entities, the Archdiocese, Milton Hospital, Milton Academy, Harry College. And then finally, we looked at town-owned land, which we'll talk about tonight. So when I put all that stuff on paper, this is what it looks like to me. It's insane. I can't, these are the type of equations I used to do as an engineering student. And it makes this looks easier to me than everything else that we're dealing with tonight. So, as I mentioned, for me, I want to get some of these, variables that are out there that goes into this equation into constants. And once they're into constants, we can price them. We can put dollar values to them. And in that timeline that I'm looking at, that's my main thing that I want to look forward to. So, over the past 2.5 years, we have identified what we're building. On March 17th, the school committee voted unanimously, 6-0, that we were building a new middle school with a pre-K. The other part that we've done, and I'll walk through it tonight in a little more detail, we've run the gamut of studying the land in this town. We have looked at every available piece of land. We ended up with town land. That's kind of where we're at and why we're here tonight. So, the vote that the school committee approves unanimously is this. So, again, I present this slide more for informational purposes for people that didn't see it. The grade configurations now at the elementary schools are going to be kindergarten to 4th grade. The Pierce Middle School, which currently houses 3 grade levels, is going to house 2. So it's going to free up space at the existing Pierce. The new middle school that we're talking about is going to house the 7th and 8th grade strands, along with the pre-K wing. And that will be on this campus, as I'm calling it, at the site with Milton High School. Now, the space that opens up at Pierce Middle School, there's administrative offices at the high school that can be relocated over to the Pierce. And that frees up space at the high school. So this one solution solves every level in the district. The other part that plays in here is like having this on the same campus. That's why this land to us is very, ideal for this. Is it plays in with this whole grade configuration that we've got approved. The other note I wanted to touch on that too is, Mike mentioned change. To do that change, if I can kind of go back to it, to do this change for the school committee was a big deal. It wasn't easy. For me, I thought it would be very, I'm new to a lot of this stuff and I'm like, yeah, it won't be that bad. And then after we did it, I realized like how significant this was. We just rechanged the entire grade structure of the Milton Public Schools, and they were for it unanimously because they understood. So this timeline that I have here is essentially our committee's timeline, and I'll walk you through it. We were formed in Springtown meeting in 2019. As we went along, we took kind of the remainder of the year to get to know each other and know what everybody's pros and cons were, you know, what we're all good at. Essentially, at the end of that year, we started a land study. We invited John Cronin in, previous town planner Bill Clark, and we had to sit down with them and went through all the land that's in the town. You know, they brought in plans, they brought in everything. It was great. So we started that and started working towards different sites. Through the past 2.5 years, we've come to this Gow Road property. So, but part of how we got there too is like the parallel paths that we were doing. You know, we issued the RFP for available land. We wanted to purchase land. We didn't have any funding, but you know, we figured, you know, we would figure that out once it came through. We didn't get any responses. The last town meeting in 2020, or the winter town meeting there, I announced when I took over this committee, we would be going after land. That was one of our goals of that year. And I was proud, you know, when we identified this land, and I'll walk you through how we got there. And essentially the Milton Times on August 6th of 2021 had an article showing, you know, we found the land. And then since that time, we've been doing public engagement. I'll walk through the number of meetings that we've had. It's incredible. So, you know, as I touched on, you know, we worked on a land study. The site selection analysis that we did, this was my previous slide that I walked through for the commission. You know, we issued the RFP, we got 0 responses. We received a list of available town parcels of land. There were 107 on there, 77 of which were below 4 acres. Our perceived plan for a school was a minimum of 4 acres. And as you'll see from our later slides, 4 acres was even too small. 6 seems to be the smaller one. So out of that 107, 77 were too small. The remaining 30 parcels that were there were schools, parks, conservation land, and town-owned parcels that had town hall and police headquarters. And I have a slide for that in a little bit. This is the RFP that we issued. It was publicly put out there to everyone that we were looking to purchase land. And as I said, there was a land swap. A ground lease. We looked at all this. We talked with St. Mary's of the Hills, privately owned with the Archdiocese, to ask for a 99-year ground lease or even purchase of the property. They were not interested. Highland Street portion of the hospital that's now going to be a memory care center, in the process of that. That was another one that we went to. We had contacts that reached out to the hospital. They were not interested, which is obvious for what they're doing now. We did touch base with St. Pius. And as I touched on our previous presentation, the lot that was provided or offered was too small. And then we also looked at the access road horse farm. It's a private property. It's actually over by where I live. And I was interested in that one too. But the problem was to get the gears of town government to fund this, purchase this land and go through it. It already got gobbled up by a developer already. So, you know, we have kind of, you know, beat the bushes as best as we can. This is that list that I was talking about. So the lines that you see here, that black line at the top, everything above that, which is 77, were all smaller than 4 acres of land. So the red line that you see, everything above that was below 6 acres. So all the stuff that was below that line, Town of Milton Police Department, cemetery, Pope's Pond, the parcel that we're talking about today, D656A, the highway, the DPW yard, Pierce Middle School, Andrews Park, Town Forest, Kelly Field, Glover School, Cunningham Collycott, Milton High School, Brooks Field, Milton High School, Neponset Marshland, which I think is the stuff down by 93, Turner's Pond, the parcel that we're talking about swapping that we did look at too, along Randolph Ave, and then all the other ones as they go down to essentially the 100 acres of the golf course. So I'd love to take the golf course if we could, but no chance. But, you know, after we digested through this entire list, as you can see, there's at a 6-acre program, there's not much. So, you know, our hands are tied. We need to build a school, and this is kind of how we got to where we were. So back to this timeline, Guile Road, that's how we came to it. We digested through, we filtered through all the available parcels, and kind of that's how we came to it. Around that same time is where the idea of the middle school came in. And it was like two pieces of a puzzle starting to fit together for that complex equation. This has been out there. We've held public meetings. This was announced in the Milton Times in August of 21. This is not new. This should not be news to a lot of people. We've been fully transparent, meeting with people, advertising, holding a lot of meetings. Again, back to that timeline, public engagement, which is essentially what we've been doing since that Times article came out. These are the meetings that we've held. So August of 2021, the first thing we did is meet with Home Inc. face to face. Secondly, right after that, we had coffee with Joe and his friends. After that, we started our onslaught of Zoom meetings. We had neighborhood meetings in September, October. We held a staff forum with Milton Public Schools to go over the grade configuration and this site on February 10th. We've further followed up with additional community forums, March 3rd, March 10th. We had another meeting with Ned in Home Inc. on March 16th. And now we're kind of in the process now of meeting with town meeting members, and bringing them up to speed. So March 30th, April 4th, and one coming up soon. So, us as a committee, we have been working as much as we can as outreach to educate everybody on exactly what we were doing. So, back to this timeline. This is where, this vote, as Mike was saying, is so important, because it's not a vote that you guys would do this and a year from now we would build a school. You know what I mean? This is a very long timeline to address something. We don't have that much time. So, one of the questions I think Linda asked was for density, or what the concept looks like. So, once we identified the site, we worked with DRA Architecture. They are the architects that built the last school building project. We asked them, we said, we think we have a site, here's some money, small amount, and could you draw some conceptual layouts on there for talking points? This is not what we were going to build, but it's just something to say, can it work? Can this site fit? And what we started noticing was, as I mentioned earlier, that 4-acre parcel that we kind of thought was our boundary, and that was theoretical without anything. Once we started getting these, I said to our committee, 4 acres, it wouldn't work. So, we kind of refined that to 6 acres. So some of the talk that's out there that originally were at 4 and now we're at 6, how did that come up? This is essentially how. What you see here is, a hand-drawn overlay of what it would look like on the site. It's a 3-story building. Essentially, as I talked about before, the preschool would house the first floor wing, and then the upper floors would be 7th and 8th. So that's kind of how we got to where we are tonight. The land swap that we're proposing, the parcel that's in question here along Guile Road is D656A, and it's made up essentially of 2 parcels right now. The hockey stick, as you see in the dashed line, which is approximately 2 acres, is going to remain conservation land. The only portion that we're looking at acquiring to change the use of this is the yellow portion, which is approximately 6.83 acres. We did have that surveyed by a survey group, BSC. So we're kind of positive on those numbers. A couple of things, one of the nice things working for a multidisciplined engineering firm that I do, we have people in-house that I'm an electrical engineer. I do not understand as well. I'm getting better at it. Some of the ecological things here. The one thing that, one of my other engineers brought up to me is the site that we're talking about here is bound. Brooks Field on one side, Guile Road, Blue Hills Parkway, and Home Inc. So the entire portion of this site is bounded. So there's really no room to expand it or do anything. The other part that he brought me up on too is, the term that I've heard a couple times on the site walk is the term old growth trees and forests. So he said, yeah, that has a specific meaning. So after talking with him, he pointed me to the Audubon Society that basically lists what this is specific designation. The parcel in question here is not listed on there. So I don't think that's proper terminology to be using when we're describing this parcel. So that was one other. So what we're looking at doing is the two parcels that are along Herrick Drive are highlighted here in blue and yellow. And there's an adjacent parcel that kind of runs along the brook that's existing conservation land. So as Mike alluded to earlier, we'd be unifying all of these and essentially turning them green, using green as a conservation color. And then this whole area along that brook would be fully under the control or ownership of conservation. So that's another thing I'm learning, through this process. As Mr. Mendunio pointed out, this has been a lot of learning. So the chair's point of what Conservation Commission owns versus what it controls was a really good point. So the Conservation Commission obviously would still have, even if this land swap didn't happen, would have control of these parcels, but they wouldn't own them. So I think that's the key takeaway, that I learned on the site walk. The other one that comes in, as I talked about, is the parcel right now on Randolph Ave. It's essentially across the street from the carriage house and along where the access road is. The red lines that you see there delineate existing conservation land that's already there, roughly about 23 acres. The 6 acres, or 6.19 to be exact acres, and I don't even know if that's exact because we haven't had it surveyed, but essentially we measured it on a map. That's currently municipal owned land. It's not conservation land. There is a brook, as you can see, that runs along 28. So there is some wetlands on the perimeter of it. But the most of it's upland, buildable site. And everyone that attended the site walk that was there kind of was in agreement with that. The other part that for Linda's question that came up, that it's not buildable. On the site walk we were there, I think the consensus was it was buildable. You would just need to build, a driveway and easement over the wetlands to get up to the buildable area. So, my contention, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, the site is buildable. And, similarly, the 711 Randolph Ave 40B project that's there is doing something exactly similar. This is, from their paperwork that's been submitted. And I know it's not an approved project, but it's, one that's there as their way of getting across the wetlands to access the site behind. So very similarly for the parcel that we have on Randolph Ave, you could do the same. The other one that Mike, alluded to is, the parcel that we're looking at here, like I said, is made up of essentially three parts. The center part is what we're looking to turn into conservation land. And what I tried to do, the map doesn't, a 2D map doesn't really give it justice. So I tried to get a better view of, what this leads into. And as Mike alluded to, once you, take the 3 of these parcels and make it all a singular parcel of conservation land, it abuts right up to the Blue Hills. So it's a good unifying factor for this. So the layout, that we're looking at, or the math of the equation that's here, we've got roughly 6.83 acres that we'd be, taking over, and we'd be trading back in about 8.87 acres. One of the things I took note of tonight that I think is important, the term ecological value. Don't look into the monetary value, but look into the ecological value. Again, this is your equation that's going to be tough. You guys also have to weigh into, as Mike talked about, the children. I try not to make this about the children, but this is part of this equation. We have to build a school. The land that's out there does not exist right now. And, the stuff that the children are running through, daily from a school, they don't know they're not supposed to be crowded. They're children. They don't know that they're not supposed to be in a library with a partition with no acoustical separation. They don't know that they're supposed to be doing music on a thing. We do, we're adults. So we know the studies that are there. We're the elected and appointed representatives of this town. And, for my committee, we've owned that, and you know, we're working hard for the past 2.5 years, you know, to address this. So I believe that's my last slide. So I just wanted to, you know, thank you again, Mr. Chair, for, you know, giving me the opportunity to present.
John, I thank you very much. Very articulate, very informative. We thank you. Are there any commissioners that would have a question or a comment of Sean while we have him captive?
I do.
Go ahead, Tom.
Sean said towards the end of this presentation, he mentioned we were standing on the sidewalk on Route 28, and he said there was a consensus that that parcel was buildable. I feel like he wasn't listening to me because I made quite an argument while we were there, why I didn't think it was buildable. And I don't want to go through that argument again, but I just think it was misreported to say that. Because it may have been a consensus, but it was a consensus minus me.
All right, I like that. Because I agree.
I will gladly accept that. That is fine. Yes.
You were a dissenting vote, Tom. I agree with that.
I was also a dissenting vote at Eric Drive, where it was those parcels which were left over from the subdivision. I know something about those parcels because I'm a wetlands consultant and I worked for an abutter many years ago when he was concerned about them being developed. And I believe they've had 1 or 2 other owners since then, and none of them have been able to develop them because they're all wetlands. And I think the town owns them because the last owner stopped paying taxes and we got them through a tax title. So I just have a personal opinion that those parcels are not buildable. And I think if we were to get appraisals evaluations, that would be more obvious.
That may be true. During my tenure, Tom, on the Conservation Commission, there have been 2 proposals to build. Toby Hurd, when he had the land, it was referred to as Lot 15. That abuts Craig McNaughton's house. And I remember clearly standing there with 2 separate developers trying to develop that land. And we did not allow it. There is some non-jurisdictional land there, but not much.
Yes.
But I would agree with you that the likelihood of a building going up there is slim. But I disagree a lot about the Randolph Avenue. And if you need proof, just cross the road. We've got a 90-unit development going in there where they have a limited project. Yeah. And for the public's benefit, well, wait a minute. A public's benefit, a limited project allows one to build upland and to cross a wetland. And that's exactly what they did. So I think you could easily cross, and I understand the wildlife habitat aspect of it, but we've gone through that again as a Conservation Commission, and we had permitted the wind turbine, notwithstanding the wildlife habitat, the endangered species in that area. The Conservation Commission did permit that. It's off of the land, but it's abutting to the land that has been proposed as part of the swap. So I think there was a consensus that it was buildable, but I acknowledge wholeheartedly that you disagree.
Yeah, I would say one aspect of that site visit was we didn't have a plan. So it was hard for us to look at the parcel because we couldn't walk around on it and try to figure out where the boundaries are. And so as a matter of fact, I don't think any of us left the sidewalk. And so another question about it is, does any part of that parcel have trash piled on it? That's something I don't know.
I'm sorry, can you say it again, Tom? I missed it.
Yeah, does any part of that parcel on Randolph Ave covered with garbage from the landfill? That's a question I have that we haven't answered. As far as crossing the wetland to develop, I agree you can do that. But that's not what I meant when I said unbuildable. I was referring to the fact that 100% of it is mapped as priority habitat for rare species. And that's something I know something about because I have documented rare species for the state and I keep an eye on areas that are mapped. And I was very much aware of the problems the city of Quincy had expanding the Pine Hill Cemetery into this same priority habitat. It was a very tough permit for them. They needed a take permit. And the deal they eventually made was they were able to develop a very small portion of the land they owned. And they had to promise to put the rest of it under a conservation restriction forever. So they got permission to develop maybe 10, 20%. That is a serious constraint on development. And I haven't heard anybody from the school building committee mention that overlay, even though it's public and it's a major environmental constraint.
No, I appreciate your comments, and I think that would go right to the heart of one of the issues that we've identified tonight, and that is the valuation of the land. I think that was Ingrid's purpose in bringing that up, that there are intangibles that go along with valuation. So I think your thoughts and comments would be included in that valuation. And I think that's something that's on our to-do list after this evening. I've got three things on my takeaway list. And the first one is the response by EOEEA in terms of, the questions that have been raised about the necessity of the unanimous vote, your comment about whether or not this would preclude us from gaining any state grants. Those are questions worthy of a response. The second one is the valuation brought up by Ingrid. The third one is sort of an adjunct to that, and that is whether or not there are alternative means to increase the value, that the town might have options to enhance the valuation given to the Conservation Commission in exchange for this parcel of land. Because it is, we do have to have a net gain. There's no question about that. So those are at least three takeaways, and I'm sure that other commissioners and you, Tom, you may have some additional things to do. But so I invite any additional things to do, but I also invite any further comment from the public, whether it's the school building committee members or I don't know if the superintendent is still with us, but I had invited him to speak before, and if he so desires, then we would welcome it. Or anybody else? Is there anybody that would like to speak?
Chair Kennedy, I would love to make a couple of comments. First of all, I want to thank you, and I would like to thank the members of the Conservation Commission. I think Mr. O'Rourke's presentation clearly articulated the desperate need that we have facing us, not only 2 years down the road, but next year. In that way, in terms of the space restraints that we have placed on us and trying to meet the needs of the growing enrollment. One of the things that I would like to share with you is, again, reiterate some of the spaces from utilizing the stage at the Glover School to, I know one parent spoke about their child in the Cunningham section of the library. On the opposite end of that same library, on the Cullycott side, there's a small office space that's occupied by 4 adults, an ELL teacher, a reading specialist, and 2 other adults in a small area. We're utilizing the teacher's room. We're utilizing the stage at the Glover. We converted space in the library at the Pierce Middle School. So the proposal that was presented to you this evening, the 5-6 building, the 7-8 building on the Gower Road site is one that alleviates that pressure and that restriction in all levels. And I can't emphasize it enough. It does it at the high school level as well. Being so close to the campus, it allows us to reinstitute not only a child studies program that we had, but help with our pre-K and give our students at the high school level that may aspire to become future educators to be part of that program and work with our students. I've been sitting here and I've been listening to some of the comments. They're all valid concerns, but I will say, and I will echo the sentiments of Mr. O'Rourke, Mr. Zulis, and say that this building committee has really thoroughly thought about every aspect of the land. We were present on the 26th as well to talk and listen to people. We did have sidebar conversations with folks who were there to learn more and express some concerns. And we're continuing our efforts to listen and give the following feedback to any questions or concerns. So I want to thank folks this evening for their attention to this, but this is a urgent situation. And I know that sounds like I'm sounding alarms, and I am, because we have made space conversions already. We're in the process of doing one more space conversion at the Glover School in the library, utilizing capital funds. We are at the max capacity, and it's going to be tight within the next 2 or 3 years. And to Mr. O'Rourke's final point about new students moving in, we've probably had about 20, 25 students move in within the last month and a half to 2 months. And to his point, we are a public school. If you reside in the town of Milton, we have to accept you. You have to come. You're entitled to come to the schools. So I just wanted to share those comments. And once again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the members of the commission, the Conservation Commission, for their attention this evening.
Well, thank you, Superintendent. It was very gracious of you to stay with us this time, and we thank you for the presentation. Are there any other officials, members of the public, citizens? Priscilla, yes, I see you.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I wanted to thank the committee for the time they're taking to review this. I wanted to mention that when Sean spoke about Joe meeting with him early on, I was one of those persons representing town meeting members from Precinct 10. One of the things we asked about then, and I would ask the committee again now, is that when the project went forward for town meeting to vote on the property on the Parkway, the Ice House property, one of the concessions that was noted in that agreement, it would include no cuts to the Parkway, no changes, physical changes in the Parkway, no traffic lights. And when we spoke at our first meeting together, I asked about whether the building committee would perceive a need for a traffic light, and there was a perceived need for a traffic light because there would be buses and more traffic coming at different times of day. So I would like to raise that issue again, that there was a lot of compromise by neighbors and folks along the Parkway, and that was one thing that that we agreed wouldn't happen. And so it would be sad to have made that commitment to those residents and then for that to change in the future, because that wasn't that long ago. Additionally, I think about the concept of unifying parcels of land in other parts of town. At the same time, the parcel that's being proposed is part of a contiguous green space along the Parkway now. So I'm not sure that I'm convinced that breaking up green space to be able to create unified parcels somewhere else is a good reason to do such. And additionally, I know that when Mr. Benduno presented to the committee at your last meeting, just emphasizing the master plan, and that the number one aspect of the master plan for all those that worked on it, including a lot of us, was open space and maintaining open space and green space and preserving trees and outdoor spaces. So I believe that the committee has done great work, but I don't think we're done yet. I think that we have more to consider with a precedent that we would set for taking conservation land to build on it. We had a precedent on the Parkway where we took residential land and converted it to commercial. This would be a second precedent that would be set along the Parkway. And I think that's really important to a lot of town meeting members to understand, you know, again, in a short time, why we might do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. That was very eloquent. Thank you. Other members? Yes, Joe.
Yeah, well, I got one question for Sean, couple of questions for Sean I wanted to ask after his presentation. I read Alex Whiteside's letter today, and he mentioned something about the Carr Estate, 10 acres coming up for sale potentially. I know nothing about that. Is that something you folks know about, looked at? I don't even know where that is. I think it's in the Brush Hill Road area, right? But he had mentioned that.
Yeah, we have not seen that yet. But if you want to forward it over, you know what I mean, we can take a look at it.
Well, he said in his letter and that he heard it was coming up for sale and there was 10 acres, I believe. I have the letter.
Yeah.
But he would have
That-
more.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe, I don't have the letter, so I can't, you know,
Yeah.
if you can forward it to me, that's fine.
The other thing I wanted to mention, and this is for you, Sean, as well as Linda, and maybe even Ned Cochran. You know, we need to be talking about this too in the context of the Ice House development, which will be a reality on that end of the street, right across from this land and a potential school. I think, you know, personally speaking, because I'm friends with a few people down there in Home Inc., you know, they're going to be facing some changes and some issues that maybe they're not fully cognizant of, or maybe they don't care about them. I don't know, but there'll be significant changes on the southern end of the parkway. So that also ties in with a point I just wanted to make in reference to Sean's appeal, as well as Mr. Jets. I mean, I think we all agree something's got to be done with the schools. There's an urgency. The committee's worked hard. They've put in time. They've looked in all these different places admirably. But, you know, I think what Priscilla was saying, maybe, you know, kind of taking a little more time to inform ourselves about this kind of thing is essential, because there will be impacts. I mean, we can have beautiful diagrams and honest appeals, but there will be consequences and impacts, many of which will be irreversible. And, you know, when developers and designers put forward plans, you don't hear the cars, you don't see the cars, you don't hear the cars braking and speeding and the doors opening and closing. You know, it's all sugar and honey in a way. So there will be impacts. There'll be that loss of 7 acres on the parkway, as well as the commotion that a school will create with a 52-unit development across the street with some commercial space. So those are real. And that's why people are questioning this, because they're not questioning the validity, the earnesty, or the hard work of anybody here. I also want to just say, since I'm on the soapbox for a minute, you know, Mike made some good points too. We have consequential decisions here, but I don't necessarily think it's easy to discern what the greater good is. I think they both have great good and equal value. Open space, land for our children, future generation. I mean, I had a lot more land when I was a kid available to me in my neighborhoods than my grandson has today. And I think we can all relate to parcels of land that we once played in, we once vacationed in, we loved, we saw, and they disappeared incrementally, piece by piece by piece, until the places that were, you know, important to us in our childhood, we can't recognize them anymore. So, you know, Alex made the point too, that this is going on everywhere. Town governments have a strong, powerful voice. School boards have a strong, powerful voice. Select boards have a strong, powerful voice. Trees and open land has almost no voice except for the people who stand up to defend them, and the conservation commissioners whose job it is to, you know, discern all of this and protect them as well. So I think we need to keep that in mind. You know, urgency, need, yes, but also dire consequences are real consequences, and there'll be good consequences too, of course. And it's wise for us to proceed with caution and this kind of thing. I think we're a smart community, smart people. We understand the significance of these environmental issues as well as the educational value. I don't want us to be guilty of a failure of imagination here, a failure of vision. I don't really think this has to be either or two ideas in conflict. I think basically they're not competing, but they're complementary needs. The need for land, environmentally protected spaces within our community, and classroom space. How we solve that is definitely a challenge. I think we're getting this, and it's going to be painful as we move forward. But I think the beauty is we can make choices as a community based on our values, information, knowledge, and our vision for the future and our kids in this community. Because we're taking something from the past, and we're also potentially taking something from the future. So I'm only conservative in my life when it comes to this kind of thing, land use and community and open space in these things, because I've just seen it disappear my whole life, piece by piece by piece. So anyway, that's enough. Yes.
We thank you very much, Joe. It was very passionate and very informative.
John, if
So
I-
thank you. Is there anyone else, Ned, you want to speak?
Yeah, since my name was raised.
Objection, Your Honor.
Yeah, I am, as you know, for the last 30 years, 20 years, I've been involved in real estate development in Milton and a lot of discussions with town meeting. My fundamental sense is this is the overriding need for this school outweighs any other concern. Last year, town meeting voted over the objections of folks in East Milton to support the location of a new fire station in East Milton. Town meeting voted over the objection of neighbors to approve zoning for a memory care facility and land approximate across the street from the hospital. A lot of issues that we have to go through on that, but they approved it. My opinion is that town meeting will overwhelmingly approve the land swap. That was my advice to Home Inc. All of the issues and concerns that are being raised are manageable. Traffic, wetland impacts, otherwise, they are all manageable. This is really a balancing test. And I think town meeting, wisely so, will vote overwhelmingly to support the land swap, because the future of this town depends on the ability to educate its children. And I'm convinced by that. I know that the issues, the development related issues can easily be managed. Traffic can be managed. Wetland impacts can be designed and managed. Noise can be managed. All of the other issues and concerns can be managed. It's all possible. I applaud the work that Sean and the committee have done to get to where they've gotten to. It's a tough choice. We face tough choices all the time, but this town needs this school. Home Inc. recognizes that they need this school, and they are comfortable with the notion that this is the best option that's facing the town today. And I would say that, you know, the commission ought to consider, well, you have to do what you have to do. But I can tell you that in my own professional perspective, that the issues that have been raised are manageable. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ned. I don't want to cut off public debate, but I know that we need to do some additional homework. I recognize the need for movement, and if we can gather the requisite information before next Tuesday, we may have sufficient information to have a vote on it. But I'm not sure, particularly on the valuation side, it may take longer than that. So the possibility exists that we won't be able to resolve this by next week, because I think it is important that we have all appropriate data to make a reasoned decision. And Lizzie Carroll, I see your hand up, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Kiernan. I'm sorry, my Zoom hand doesn't show up very well. And thank you all very much. I'm Lizzie Carroll. I'm a member of the school committee and a town meeting member in precinct 3. I have a pre-K student as well as a second grader, and I actually ran for town meeting for the first time several years ago now, after seeing a presentation about the overcrowding of the Milton Public Schools. And at that point in time, I had a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old, and I thought, like I want to get involved and participate in this. I wanted to just raise my voice here, and I thank you for letting me do that, because I know that many of us who have young kids, you know, it's not easy all the time to attend the public meetings and share our perspective, but I feel that on both town meeting and on school committee, I represent a lot of people who share very deep concerns about the real consequences and impacts of the overcrowding. So, Mr. Modugno, I appreciate everything you were sharing about the consequences and impacts on the conservation side and environmentally, but I need to share that those of us with kids attending these schools see those consequences and impacts every day. And that's been alluded to. You've hopefully seen the video that shares some of the overcrowding, but you can't possibly capture in 2 minutes what like hundreds and hundreds of kids and families are experiencing day in and day out, have been for years, will continue to be for years, even if this moves as efficiently as it possibly could. And I was moved to hear you, Mr. Modugno, talking about the like, yes, there's less sort of, we don't recognize the land, the green spaces in our community, but I feel like we also don't recognize the libraries in our school, the art room, the music room, the computer labs. Like we can't recognize those as enrichment spaces that our students need to learn and sort of gain a well-rounded set of skills. And I just feel I need to tell you that there are so many people who are just so deeply concerned about this. And I just feel, Mr. O'Rourke, I want to thank you for representing and your entire committee, like representing the interests of these children with your tireless work. And I know it hasn't been easy, but I feel like this is what Mr. Zulus was talking about in that sort of greater common good of our town. And you've all recognized it in different ways, but from the parent perspective and the constituents that I feel I serve, please, I beg you to kind of keep that like close to your hearts as you make the decision, because it really isn't abstract. And it really is about the fact that, my child like attends class in a library, which means the library is not available to be a library the way it should be. And that's not even at the school with the flimsy partitions for the classrooms, which is a whole sort of separate thing. And the last thing I'll say about the trailers is if we go to trailers, the only place those trailers can sit is on our playgrounds. So the only that space will no longer be recognizable as a playground. And so all of these decisions, fit together in these ways, and the stakes are just so high. So thank you very much for hearing me out.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Very helpful. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? If not, we can adjourn with our list of homework items.
John, it's Ingrid. I just want to make sure there are a couple points here. I just want to go through my notes that we get some additional information. And that is, one is the email that I sent earlier today about getting more information on the Randolph parcel regarding the wildlife 806 and the rare species 1101. And I think, Steve, you had mentioned you were going to try to get that information. And then secondly, and I can't remember who made the point about the vernal pool on the Guile Road parcel and the isolated wetland and the possibility that perhaps the isolated wetland can be relocated in closer proximity to the vernal pool, thereby perhaps increasing its viability. And I would love to know more about the logistics of doing that and maybe examples of where such a move was done, and essentially getting a sense of, will that work? What are the chances that will work? And maybe talk to some people or find out where that sort of approach was taken and how it worked out.
Well, Ingrid, that we may be getting ahead of ourselves here, because that would require a plan. And the school building that we've seen is just a concept.
I understand that. No. And I'm not wanting that level of detail. In my mind, these questions are in the context of value of the land and in terms of conservation value of the land. That's the objective here, at least.
All right, so we could fit that in or make it an adjunct to the valuation component, because that would go directly to the environmental value or the resource, protection of the resource value of the land.
That was my objective.
Perfect.
John, I think I
With
raised,
that analysis.
I
What's
think
that?
I raised that issue. It's Ned.
Okay.
Because Winter Valley is going through that. If you recall, there's a isolated wetland.
Yes. Yeah.
In the area that a new building is proposed. There is a more significant wetland to the rear of the property. We're coming forward with a proposal to replicate on a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 basis at that location. So it's one of those things I think that's manageable under the environmental protection process. I'm just highlighting that here because if this is in fact an isolated wetland and there is a high value vernal pool, potential vernal pool, that it may be possible to enhance the value of the vernal pool by relocating that wetland in a way, sort of on a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 mitigation basis that it could enhance things. So I raised it. I raised it because of experience on another property here in Milton. It's certainly something that the commission would want to look at, and I think Steve obviously would be.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more about that.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of quick comments about the vernal pool. The vernal pool is on home Inc. property. Most of the wetland around the vernal pool is probably on home Inc. property as well.
Okay.
So we may have to go onto home Inc. property to do any enhancement of the wetland or build another vernal pool. And I have done that a number of times, and I can show Ingrid some places that I have actually built vernal pools that are now certified.
Okay, so Ned, is it your anticipation that Home Inc. would be amenable to such a thing?
I think at this point it's a question. But I think Home Inc. is being realistic and they're thinking about the big picture. And if it's one of those issues, it's a detail to be addressed. It's a detail that can be addressed.
Right. Well, yeah, that would be great. It would be a shame to have certainly diminish that land if the vernal pool is really going to get into trouble.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, I would just note that topics like that, which Ingrid has raised, have also been part of the curriculum over the years of the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions. So we might also consult with MAC as well as have the information from Steve on his experience.
Thank you.
Right.
I do know that one of the things that has to happen, and we've requested, is there needs to be serious wetland delineation and survey. And I think that's obviously to be coming, but understanding more specifically about what the land is, what the contours are, where are the wetland boundaries, what are the impacts, and how those can be mitigated are important considerations going forward. And we've asked the commission, the committee, to be paying attention to that. And I know that they're trying to engage their surveyors in moving forward on that issue.
Thanks.
Steve, I think you've already contacted Matt Byrne, have you not?
I have not, no.
Okay. All right, well, he is a recognized expert in vernal pools. He's been a long time presenter to the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions, and he's a recognized expert in that area. So he's somebody that I would be interested in seeking some guidance and utilizing as a consultant.
Mr. Chairman, he has been contacted.
I thought he had been.
Yes, and
but it would have been through Steve. So Steve didn't. Oh, you did.
That's correct.
Oh, perfect. All right, I mixed you up. Good. Yeah, can you fill us in on that?
Some recent communication on that, and we can follow up offline on possibilities and also discuss this with Sean and others.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes great sense. And that goes to I guess the underlying point here is that even if we were to swap the land out, we don't lose our jurisdictional control over that so that we can exercise our statutory authority to protect the wetlands and particularly vernal pools that are extremely sensitive. Now, I saw somebody's hand up, which I usually don't see, and if I'm missing it, there you, Ada. All right, I knew I saw a hand. Go ahead.
I was in and I was out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, and I won't take much of more of your time. I really appreciate this thorough conversation and the points that you've identified that need further clarification. I just wanted to address a couple of points that were made earlier about the projections and what our schools will be doing in terms of the NESDEC projections going forward. And one of the items that they look at with the projections are not just the birth rate, but also the birth to kindergarten relationship. And Milton has a unique graph that shows up on our annual NESDEC report that shows the difference between the number of children that were born 5 years ago and the number of children that actually show up for kindergarten. And what it shows is that young families are moving here because of the schools, and they're coming and they're enrolling their kids in the schools, even though their children weren't born here. So there's a real differential there that our people are drawn to this town for the schools, and it's a wonderful thing, and it's a challenge for us that we're facing right here. The other is about the location, and one of the things that we've talked about is that has been a concern that's been addressed by some parents is the transitions that might be added to students' educational experience going from a 5-6 school at Pierce to a 7-8 upper middle school at the new building. And that is an additional transition. However, we really see this upper and lower middle school option as helping to soften that transition. There will be continuity, and there will be smaller numbers of grades in each of those buildings so that developmentally they will be together with children their own age moving through. And then again, the location right by the high school will soften that transition to the high school because students will be right there, right next to the high school campus. They'll have access to athletic opportunities and academic opportunities if they are available to them there. And it is in a walkable location for many of our students who live right in the neighborhood. And I know we've heard that a lot from the neighbors that we've spoken to. So thank you for that. I also wanted to just alert you to Principal Holly Concannon has joined us tonight, and she's here to share just a little bit about her perspective about the overcrowding at the Collycott School. If it's okay, we won't take much more of your time, but I would love if you'll allow Principal Concannon to have a couple words.
We certainly will.
How are you? Thank you for having me. I was in and out in 3 different locations at this meeting, so I appreciate all your time, and I know it's getting late. I am a resident of town, and I have an 8th grader at Pierce right now as well. Both of my children graduated from Collycott School. We moved here with our children for the schools, so everything you said resonates with me for sure. I'm now the principal of the Collycott School. I started my position in Milton in the year 2009 as a curriculum coordinator, working in all 4 schools. My office was changed every year. I was under the stairs, in the gym, in the nurse's office, and without an office many times. When I became the principal of the Collycott School, I have an office, which I now share with my assistant principal because she has forfeited her office because we just have maximized every inch of the building. When I assumed the position, there were 669 children in a school built for 500. and we're connected to another school who's also built for 500. Right now, Collycott and Cunningham house about 1,300 students, and we have maximized every inch of space. We have knocked down walls. We have given up art and music rooms. We have really, many of you have seen firsthand what has happened in the library at Cunningham and Collycott. We have a small conference room that is also boarded up by 8-foot temporary walls that house our EL teacher, our English language teacher, our reading specialist, actually 2 reading specialists, and our Spanish teacher. So when you see that video, I know the goal was to make it brief, but I would invite anybody, if you ever wanted to see exactly what's going on, seeing it firsthand is pretty powerful. The video is amazing, but I promise you that since 2009, we have walked every building and we have tried to identify extra space, and we're doing the best we can. But I promise you, we need a new building. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It's very helpful to us in our analysis. Thank you. All right, is there anyone else, any commissioners, members of the public that wish to be heard? If not, I think we have our agenda lined up. We will do our utmost to get the data sufficient to make a decision on next Tuesday. But I do acknowledge that it's possible that we will not have things like the valuation, including Ingrid's concern with that added valuation component of it. We may not have it. And so I don't want to raise expectations that we don't guarantee a vote next Tuesday, but we will do our utmost to get the data that's required. So it will be on the agenda next Tuesday. We'll be back on Zoom, and I look forward to revisiting the issue and hopefully with additional data. All right, with that, if I hear nothing, no protest, then I'd invite a motion to adjourn. Is there such a motion?
Aye.
Todd? All right, sir. Is there a second to that?
Second.
All right, thanks, Tom. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Thank you. Then we'll see you next week, and I'm sure we'll be in touch with a lot of you in the next 7 days. Thanks all very much.